Good morning, everyone. So, we are discussing the second half of the 16th century, which is known as the Elizabethan Age, and we are discussing the flowering of Renaissance, 1558 to 1603. We've discussed the social background. Today, I will talk about the literary background. Which you can also say that, as for what literary background means, it is the impact of the Renaissance on Elizabethan literature. What impact it had, obviously, because when we are saying it is a flowering of Renaissance, then obviously it is telling us about the impact of Renaissance on the literature of 16th century or the Elizabethan age. Now, these impulses, there were two impulses which I have discussed in the last lecture. In the very initial lecture, there were two impulses, and I told you that they were the twin threads, which relates to the Renaissance literature. So there were two impulses which resulted in the great illumination in the widening of man's intellectual, physical, and spiritual horizon. And what was these two impulses, which I've already discussed earlier? That the first impulse was derived from the revival of classical art and literature, and the second impulse was derived from great voyages of discovery. Okay, that is what happened. Now both these impulses, they run through the very text of Renaissance literature. When we talk of the Elizabethan literature or the Renaissance literature, you can find these two impulses running through them. Okay, so the first background, literary background in relation to the impact of Renaissance and Elizabethan literature is the impact of the classical mythology and literature. It was towards the end of the 15th century, that some English scholars, attracted by the fame of न्यू लर्निंग, व्हाट डिड दे डू? न्यू लर्निंग क्या था? रेनेसा. न्यू लर्निंग के बारे में जानने के लिए व्हाट डिड दे डू? दे विजिटेड इटली, the very home of Renaissance, the very center of Renaissance. And on their return to England, they founded the Oxford. There was a spurt of translations, translated works from the mythology, classical mythology, Greek mythology, whatever they read here, they translated it. उसमें कैक्सटन का भी रोल रहा है. हम ये सारे फैक्टर्स पढ़ चुके हैं. It is just they are coming again and we are placing them over here. So it was the classical drama which gave to English drama its divisions into scenes and acts and unities of time, place, and action, its rules of artistic composition. The language was enriched with new words, and the translators learned the art of using words with power and dignity. English style and prosody were formed by these countless translations. They provided the English writers with the necessary discipline and training. So, whatever, most of the works, if I have to talk of Shakespeare's work also, you will find a great influence of the Greek literature. His tragedies, they are based on the definitions or what we call the Greek tragedies. The pattern that he develops, that there is a man who is of high stature, and why that person suffers, he suffers because of his own whim, because of his own folly. Something stuck in his mind, and he brings about his own downfall. तो एक जो पैटर्न है ना, दैट पैटर्न हैज़ बीन अडॉप्टेड फ्रॉम द Greek tragedies. That is what I'm trying to tell you. So there was a significant influence of these classical mythologies. Then there was contact with Italy. To get classics, English scholars had to go to Italy, and this contact with Italy for the second time inspired English writers. Close on the heels of the men of learning went the men of fashion also. The classical learning and the art of Italy, its rich sensuousness, its splendor dazzled their eyes and corrupted their morals. The literature of English was enriched by an immense looting of Italian treasure, but the falls of Italy could not infect English life to any great extent. Now, ये जो करप्शन ऑफ मॉरल्स की बात कर रहे हैं, देर इज़ अ कैटेगरी ऑफ पोइट्री जो हम पढ़ेंगे जिसे हम लाइसेंशियस पोइट्री बोलते हैं. सो सम हाउ इट कम्स फ्रॉम दैट इन्फ्लुएंस ओनली. ओके, नेक्स्ट इज़ योर new ideals and values. The revival of ancient Greco-Roman culture had a profound impact on the ideals of life. The ascetic, ये वाला ascetic idol of the Middle Ages was replaced by the new idol of enjoyment of life. Man had again grown conscious of the glory and wonder of the creation and the beauty of human life and human body. This new idol found reflection everywhere in Renaissance literature. The zest for life instinctively and naturally found its expression in song. England was transformed into a veritable nest of singing birds. Everyone sang down from the flowery courtier to the man in the street. Men craved for entertainment, and in response for this demand, there came the drama, novels, stories of love, bloodshed, violence, licentious. Consequently, the lyric, the drama, and the short story are the characteristic modes of expression in Elizabethan era. Not enjoyment alone, but also action was the new idol. Sir Philip Sidney is the best representative of the Renaissance ideal of a perfect gentleman. Who? Sir Philip Sidney. Next was The Prince. It was a Italian work that was written by Machiavelli. One of the most popular works during the Renaissance was The Prince of the Italian writer Machiavelli. He taught an opportunistic utilitarian philosophy of worldly success and ruthless self-aggrandizement. Now, since you have read your fiction, so utilitarianism is something, a term you are aware of. Okay, so this particular work taught them of opportunistic utilitarian philosophy. Then was the spirit of questioning. The Renaissance was also fostered the spirit of questioning, of free and impartial quest for truth. Francis Bacon was the most important essayist of this age. He developed the inductive method of research. The spirit of free inquiry is at the very root of his major works. Literary criticism is also an expression of this very spirit. Literary criticism, this is another genre of literature which you will study in your coming semesters. So this was started by Francis Bacon. Next is Plato, his influence. The Renaissance also inspired Elizabethan England with a faith in the greatness of letters, especially of poetry. Plato was one of those ancients who had the greatest influence. The Platonic doctrine that poets are divinely inspired was well known even to the man in the street. The poetry was regarded as the first of first of men, everybody tried to be a poet. So, on his footprints, everybody wanted to be a poet. The poetry was okay. Poetry no longer remained the privilege of a few. So तभी हम बोल रहे हैं ना, पिछले उसमें भी मैंने आपको बताया, अभी भी मैंने आपको बताया that England had became the nest of singing birds. That is why, because every third person had become a poet. Then, delight in the beauty of language. The study of logic was replaced by the study of rhetoric. जब हम language की बात करते हैं तो हम rhetoric and prosody की बात करते हैं. That is used by writers and poets to improvise the effect on the language. The rhetorians encouraged their pupils to embellish and decorate their language. They delighted in language for language's sake, rather than from any desire to increase its effect. These literary affectations gave rise to euphemism. ये rhetoric में ही पढ़ते हैं हम. अब तो हम euphemism को ये मानते हैं ना कि जो outdated हो गया है. Euphemism associated with the name of euphemism was started by John Lilly. Okay. Rhetoric prosody के बाद आ जाते हैं meters. Attempts were made by a group of young men called Areopagus to transplant classical meters into English verse, English poetry. Areopagus. So what happened? What happened? Meters were used. Meters were used in English poetry. Classical meters were used. The only important meter that could flourish in England were the sonnet and the blank verse. So which two meters were used? The sonnet was used, poem of 14 lines, and the blank verse was used. The two measures were associated with the names of White and Surrey. The great sonnet sequences of Sidney, Spenser, and Shakespeare are well known, and blank word makes great drama possible. Next is Plato's Republic and Renaissance Utopias. So this work, Plato has written Republic, and the Utopia that was written by Moore. They were like inspiration. So the doctrines of the symposium are at the root of Spenser's hymn to intellectual beauty, and Plato's Republic encouraged new ways of thinking and inspired Moore's Utopia, and Moore had written Utopia. Then Francis Bacon, the great essayist, his New Atlantis. The Utopia is based upon Plato's Republic and Bacon's but its framework is derived from the great voyages of discovery. And it is believed that whatever works, they have been written, obviously, they have they combine those twin impulses that I have already mentioned in the beginning. These two impulses, ये combine करते हैं जितने भी writers हैं. Okay, so they follow that. And last is the spirit of discovery and adventure, what impact it had. The influence of the spirit of discovery and adventure also runs through all the literature of the Elizabethan age. The exploits of English sailors and the wonders of the New World fired the imagination of the people and the poets and the dramatists. So, the social background जो हमने पढ़ी है और जो लिटरेरी बैकग्राउंड हमने पढ़ी है, ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ दीज टू वी आर गोना स्टडी द 4 genres, that is poetry, the prose, the drama, and the criticism of this particular age. These I have already divided amongst you people. प्रोज और ये साथ ही आ जाता है, क्रिटिसिज्म, नॉवल भी इसी में आ जाएगी, आपकी एसेज भी इसी में आ जाएंगे, राइट. सो keep in mind these two things, and then we work on the poetry on the 4 genres, let us say. And your job, जो work मैंने आपको दिया है, your focus should be on the writer, anything significant about the writer and his works. That is the most important thing, because in the answers also you're going to write the same thing. Now when you're asked that write write a note on the Elizabethan poetry, so obviously there will be an introduction which you will first mention to talking about the features of poetry. तो features हमने यहाँ discuss कर लिए हैं, वही features set in होंगे Elizabethan poetry when we will discuss. Okay, and then obviously you will just mention the writers, the poets, and the works that are written about them. Little points about the works that they have written. Okay, so I hope I made myself clear. Hear the lectures and make your notes side by side. And as I had sent you a message on this premises or on this format, you will start, all of you will start preparing the 17th century, which is also known as the Puritan age. अपनी PPTs बनाना शुरू कर दो, अपना होमवर्क करना शुरू कर दो इसके बेसिस पे. I can ask any one of you to share your lecture on the age, पूरी डिस्कस करोगे, ठीक है. So start doing that. That's all for today.